Hello everybody and welcome to Spiritual Awakening 101. My name is Jerry Yakov and I'm your host. I'm also a student and teacher of a particular spiritual path, and it's called A Course in Miracles. Here's a copy of my book, A Course in Miracles. This book first came out in 1976, and it was published by the Foundation for Inner Peace. And it's been translated into many different languages and distributed throughout the world, many different countries. The idea of A Course in Miracles came from a woman named Helen Schucman, and she received inner dictation, or a channeling, if you will, from Jesus. This was the identified voice that she heard within her mind, and she dutifully took down for 8 years, over a period of 8 years, everything that she heard. And after the 8 years were up, this is the result. Almost 700 pages of text, 365 workbook lessons, and in the back is a manual for teachers. So it's quite a volume, and I'll admit it is not easy to read and understand. However, once we dig beneath the surface a little bit, we start to see a pattern that suggests we're to be loving, we're to be forgiving, we're to identify as spiritual, we're to identify with everybody else, our brothers and sisters, as spiritual kin, brothers and sisters, if you will. And today's workbook lesson I'm going to be reading and discussing with you is I will step back and let God lead the way. Well, this is a reference to our intrinsic oneness with our Creator. Contrary to what the ego mind tells us, that we've separated and we're lost, and that we in some way have difficulty reconnecting with our Creator, with God, however you want to identify that power, God of your understanding. There's a sense of being lost, forlorn, suffering as the Buddhists call it. Well, this particular workbook lesson says, I'll step back in my mind's eye and let God lead the way. He's always there. It's always there. I'm not forlorn and lost and separated. So this was, I think, the gist of what Helen took down over 8 years in so many different permutations and melodic suggestions. It's written in iambic pentameter, which Shakespeare wrote in that same style. So it can be read poetically, it can be read as prose, it can be read as a spiritual masterpiece, but most of all, it can be read for practical application in our lives. We're to take this idea, particularly the one we're using today, that we can step back and let God lead the way in our lives with perfect equanimity, spiritual serenity and peace, and know that we will be taken care of. That our lives, as he says in A Course in Miracles, all stones will be removed from our path. Well, can we say that by virtue of following our ego? That's had nothing but disastrous effects in our lives. Total unmanageability in many instances, with brief time periods of pleasure, but overall a sense of being forlorn and purposeless. Well, let's get into this. Thank you for bearing with me. I wanted to introduce A Course in Miracles a little bit again and remind those of you that haven't watched the show before that this book is available. You can buy it in bookstores and so forth and online. The first paragraph in I Will Step Back and Let Him Lead the Way says, there is a way of living in the world that is not here, although it seems to be. You do not change appearance, though you smile more frequently. Your forehead is serene, your eyes are quiet, and the ones who walk the world as you do recognize their own. Yet those who have not yet perceived the way will recognize you also, and believe you are like them, as you were before. So here is a a very important concept in A Course in Miracles, and that's the distinction between form and content. Form, at the level of the body and of the world, really is the appearances, people's outsides, what we present to each other. And it says, those that have not had the awakening to follow God from within at the level of content live their lives at the level of appearances and form, and they will recognize you as well. But they'll only recognize you as a limit, as a separation from themselves. Where those who recognize you because they've done their own inner work and know that they themselves can step back and let God lead the way, know that there is a joining of minds. Our true identity is minds or spirit. So we don't go poof and disappear practicing this in the world. We're recognizable at the form level to those that still believe their body's eyes, and we're recognizable to those who are more aware, shall we say, who are awakening in consciousness, and they know that there's an inner strength that they can relate to with you, and they recognize their own. Well, we want everybody to awaken, don't we? We want everyone to know that there is an inner guide with a capital G that we can follow and co-create with. Well, the next paragraph is very interesting. It says, the world, at the level of form, is an illusion. Those who choose to come to it are seeking for a place where they can be illusions and avoid their own reality. So everybody that is in the world at the level of form and believe that they're a separate body from all the other billions of bodies in the world really have come here seeking a place where they can be illusions. I'll give you a biblical comparison or analogy. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge or life, so to speak, and they realized a duality where none existed, what happened is they became embarrassed of their nakedness at the level of form, and so they hid from God. And this is a reference to believing that if we come into the world of illusion, that we can avoid our own reality and we can hide. This is our metaphor for the bushes that Adam was hiding in when God called out and said, Adam, where are you? And he recognized that Adam was hiding in the bushes, and Adam said, I'm hiding. Now, it may be a stretch, but I present this as a way for us to understand all of the masks that we wear at the level of form to hide from our true identity as spirit, and the fact that each one of us is the same self-spirit. There's no separation or distinguishing characteristics that are real. There are illusory characteristics that we maintain to identify as an illusion and hide. This is part of the problem, which is called sin, guilt, and fear. So the idea of sin, guilt, and fear as identification of oneself is really a contradiction of the truth. And one thing we can say about the truth is that the truth is always true. So if the truth is that we are sinless and guiltless and innocent, a holy child of God, then the ego identification as sinful and guilty and lacking innocence, all of these separating characteristics between me and everybody else, really cannot be true. Only the truth is true. And by virtue of waking up to the truth, we then let go of our belief in the ego and all of its untruth. So I'm not sinful. I'm not separate from you. You're not sinful. We are spirit. And when I step back and let God lead the way in my thinking and in my self-identification, I recognize the spirit in you, and I recognize your sinlessness. And by virtue of that, I recognize my own sinlessness. Anyway, what it's saying here is the world is an illusion. It's a reference to the way I've made it up and the way you've made it up, untruthfully. When we align with the truth that we're sinless, then we see the real world. Then we know that we're all forgiven, that we've all been saved, if you will. Saved not from any original sin that was in fact truthful, but from the misidentification, from the error, from the mistaken identity of being sinful. So this is a radical departure, if you will, from the ideas that are promulgated maybe by many churches in Christian theology. There is no original sin. There's only the extension of the Christ from the Creator. And the Creator is in us, and we're in the Creator. Not as bodies, but as minds. The Christ mind, the Buddha mind, the Pure Land, the consistent extension of love and light with no darkness or shadows. Nothing to spoil it, nothing to foist guilt on our shoulders and carry around, nothing that I can foist onto you of guilt so you carry around guilt. All of that makes for an illusory world. So let's get back to this and maybe it'll become a little more clear. It says, so those who choose to come to the world as an illusion are seeking a place where they can be illusions and avoid their own reality. Well, I want to just clarify that a bit. We don't want to identify as love. We want to identify as sin and guilt. And that's wrong-minded, and we suffer, and we're fearful. Now, it's difficult for any explanation to make sense of why we would do that. Why would we throw away our inheritances, sinless and guiltless and spiritual, to know ourselves as holy? Why would we throw that away for an identity of sinfulness, or as it says here, an illusory identity? The Course is not very forthcoming, if you will, as far as the explanation. It does say, however, that if you look at the consequences of your own thought system, you can see that you're still throwing away that holy inheritance of sinlessness and of being spirit. So it's not useful to say, why did that whole chain of events, which the Course calls a tiny mad idea, or the fall from a heavenly state of grace, how could that have ever happened? Well, it's not important how it could have happened. We can look at how we're continuing to still believe that. And that's where we have, in the present moment, in the now, the opportunity to step back and let God lead the way out of that morass, out of that sense of terror, this tiny tick of time where we became seemingly terrified of our own identity and the identity of others. This is a very deep spiritual teaching, and we have to approach it with a great sense of trust and faith that we don't know our way out of this morass. However, there is one who does, and that one is the Holy Spirit, God's emissary in our minds. The memory of our true identity is God's extension of love and light. And that's why it says, I'll practice right now in the present moment, stepping back and letting the Holy Spirit lead the way. That takes me out of the morass. That takes me out of the world of illusion that I've made for myself. So it says, yet when they find their own reality is even here, our own reality as spirit in this world of illusion that we've made, then they step back and let the Holy Spirit lead the way. Miracles are uplifting, fulfilling, joyful, blissful, filled with love and light. And, you know, they lead to wanting, deeply motivated, wanting more. The Course says if miracles aren't happening in our lives all the time, something's wrong. So we want to get restored to the state of miracle-mindedness, miracle readiness. And it says, what other choice is really theirs to make? To let illusions walk ahead of truth is madness. This illusory idea of a world of separation and sin. But to let illusion, separation and sin, sink behind the truth of love and light, and let the truth stand forth as what it is merely sanity. This is the simple choice we make today. The mad illusion will remain a while in evidence for those to look upon who chose to come and have not yet rejoiced to find they were mistaken in their choice. They cannot learn directly from the truth because they have denied that it is so. So we're insisting that the ego's illusory world is our reality. And so that means you and I, need a teacher with a capital T who perceives their madness, but who still can look beyond illusion, as the Holy Spirit looks beyond illusion for us, and to the simple truth that's in us. If truth demanded they give up the world, it would appear to them as if it asked the sacrifice of something that is real. It's too terrifying, too much light, too quickly for us to simply abandon everything that we've come to cherish, which are really valueless false idols. So many have chosen to renounce the world while still believing in its reality. And they have suffered from a sense of loss and have not been released accordingly. Others have chosen nothing but the world, and they have suffered from a sense of loss still deeper, which they did not understand. Well, here the Course is suggesting that there's a middle way. We aren't asked to fully give up this world that we've made that's illusory, but we will be asked to incorporate our spiritual truth, our spiritual mindedness into our everyday reality, albeit that it is an illusion. And in that, we can experience an awakening, and we can experience the miracle. It returns us to our right mind. And then we see things that we had made up as illusions differently. What happens is the form that I see in the world recedes into the background. And what comes to the foreground is the spiritual essence of everything and everybody. The Buddhists talk about having an awareness of the oneness in every grain of sand, of every bit of mineral in the ground, of every flower, and that the Buddha is within the flower and within the grain of sand and within the mineral, as it is within us. And why is that true? Because the illusory nature of the world is being released as we step back and let the Holy Spirit or the Buddha guide us. And we see everything as one. I love to tell the story of the Buddhist monk who went to New York and stopped at a street vendor who was selling hot dogs. And he said, make me one with everything. Meaning the hot dog, make me one with everything. But the double entendre is, of course, the idea is that I'll step back and let the Buddha guide me in knowing I am one with everything. And that is the truth. And if you start to practice, this kind of right-minded ideation, you'll realize peace and serenity. Nothing will present a threat, because we will not be projecting guilt and sinfulness onto something that seems other. It's all one with us. And we know that through the process of forgiving our initial view of people, the perception of sinfulness and guilt out there, when we forgive that, then we are restored to our right minds. And we recognize that there is no sin or guilt. That's the illusory nature of the world. The truth is, and the real nature of the world is one of forgiveness and love, and of oneness with everything, an interbeingness, an interconnectedness. I love, for instance, 12-step groups, and I'm a participant in 12-step recovery. What happens in a group when you go to a meeting is you recognize your interconnectedness with those who have bowed down to false idols but are willing to step back and let a higher power lead the way. And you recognize, and that resonates with you as well. And so you recognize that you are one with all your brothers and sisters who are in recovery, who are practicing spiritual enlightenment in any one of a variety of paths that are available. We're all in this together. Why? Because it begins to resemble more and more the truth that we aren't separate from each other. We've all fallen asleep, collectively and seemingly individually, and are having a dream. And the content of my dream may seem to be different than the content of your dream, meaning my life experiences and your life experiences seem different. But when you go beneath the surface of that illusory script, you start to recognize the sameness and the oneness of our spiritual identity. And then the script is less and less meaningful. It's less and less threatening. And we experience less and less fear because we know that the happenings in the dream have no power over us. A Course in Miracles introduction says nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. So when you start to elevate your mind above the battlefield of these warring illusions, and that's all they are, that's almost oxymoronic. You know, illusions seem to be warring each other and us, but they're a paper tiger. They're toothless. They don't frighten us anymore. I recognize the illusory nature when I'm above the battleground, and I've taken my mind and restored it to Him who will lead the way. Then I can look at it with peace and serenity. And what happens when we withdraw our beliefs in illusions is they disappear. As the Course says, they go back to the nothingness from which they came. If something is an illusion, and my wife is always reminding me, there's no hierarchy of illusions. So nothing is more real if it's an illusion than another illusion. And nothing is more frightening, or conversely, nothing is more attractive and worthy of attachment if it's an illusion than anything else. This starts to dismantle the whole idea of attachments, covetousness, jealousy, envy, acquisitiveness. There's a reference in the Buddhist treatises about being aimless. Well, aimlessness in the ego world, especially in the West, sounds very negative. But when you realize that the aimlessness that it's talking about is one of not being covetous, not being ambitious to the extent that you want to take from somebody else and gain for yourself. This is one of the 5 mindfulness trainings, that we will not take from others to benefit ourselves. It also corresponds with one of the laws of chaos that we learn in the Course of Miracles. These are all universal truths. And that one of the laws of chaos is that I have what I take from somebody else, or I don't have something that somebody else has taken from me. That is not the truth. The truth is we all have everything, because we are everything. And only when we step back and let God lead the way do we become aware of it. And when we become aware of it, we have the miracle, the shift from fear to love. And we're happy, as our 12-step brothers and sisters say, happy, joyous, and free. Well, let's read another paragraph or two before the end of this episode. So here's the next paragraph. Between these paths, there is another road that leads away from loss of every kind. For sacrifice and deprivation, both are quickly left behind. This is the way appointed for you now. So here, the paragraph, and Jesus is saying very directly, there is a middle way. walk the world normally as you would. Walk your your normal activities with me. Step back and let me lead you on your daily routine. And find that there's no sacrifice. Find that you are enlivened, that there's a joy, a joie de vie, if you will, that you've never experienced while you're still going to your same job, while you're still in the same relationships and in the same families, because you are stepping back and letting God lead the way in your mind. Everything at the level of form gets transformed, whereas everything at the level of content is being revitalized in accordance with the truth, and you're awakening. So it initiates in the mind. We make the decision first in our minds. Course in Miracles says, seek not to change the world. It's illusory at the level of form. But seek to change your mind and your thoughts about the world. That's where the difference can be made. So you step back and let God lead the way by making the decision, as it says here, this is a path that is another way that leads you away from loss of every kind. So what that means is, again, that our normal activities, albeit they are illusory, we still have an investment in them, that the world of bodies and of form, but we're transcending it in our minds. So I see people as my spiritual brother and sister, and I know the truth is in them and in me, despite the fact that bodies seem to be separate. And I'm not fooled anymore, so they don't pose a threat, and I don't feel fearful. This is the true nature of a miracle, that shift from fearing others to loving them and knowing that we are one in spirit, not separate in bodies. And how do we know that? By stepping back in our minds and letting God, the Holy Spirit, the love that is within us, lead the way. And that is the bromide, if you will, the prescription for living life in the world as it seems to be, but being above it. And then as we practice forgiveness over and over again, we have moments of more and more enlightenment. And as we have moments of enlightenment, they then take us to Heaven's Gate. And as the Course in Miracles says, God will step to us and take us the final way home. And the gates open and we awaken. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was a good episode for you. I've enjoyed being with you. Namaste, shalom, and peace. We'll see you next time.